Life is Strange is one of those franchises that can really draw you into its world through its breathtaking character moments, really drawing you into its world through the people involved, a world where people grow and change and have to make the biggest and toughest decisions that any human can make and learn the consequences of their actions. Hey everyone, it's Jim from Nebcam Gaming, and in today's video I'm going to be ranking the Life is Strange series, games that I've grown to love over the past couple of months playing them. Well, mainly the first two, I'll explain. In last place we have The Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit. Now this game follows young Chris as he's dealing with the trauma of losing his mom and his drunk abusive father through his love of superheroes. Now this is more of a demo or DLC to Life is Strange 2, but I have to include it as a separate thing here because it really does stand out on its own. Chris is a relatable kid. He reminds me of me when I was younger. Thankfully I never had to go through any of the hardships that he's going through in this game, but it's more of his imagination and the way he sees the world. I like this mini story a lot. It only takes about an hour to beat unless you want to discover everything that it has to offer, which could take you around 2 to 3 hours at the most. I like the story and where it was leading. It's just a shame that it's so short. That's pretty much the only reason I've ranked it as low as it is, because it is very, very short. It's not intended to be long. It's mainly just an expansion of one episode in Life is Strange 2. I would have liked to have seen a fully fleshed out Life is Strange game evolving around this kid and his father, and how Chris deals with the trauma, and whether his father will change his ways or not and stop drinking and be a better father. But to be honest, we don't get to see it, which is a little disappointing. There's a lot of potential in this story that we just don't get to see. Even if you do play through Life is Strange 2, we don't really get a conclusion to that either. For that reason alone, Captain Spirit takes last place, but not overall am I saying that it's bad. Next up on the list is Life is Strange True Colors. Now, for True Colors, the right word I can probably use to describe it is a bit empty or hollow. Although I do really appreciate that it went back to the original game's roots and based itself in one location, despite being visually stunning, Haven is nowhere near as visually pleasing or iconic as Arcadia Bay. You pretty much just explore one little town and a park. That's kind of about it really. In Arcadia Bay there were plenty of locations you could visit but still based in that same area. You had the school, you had the junkyard, you had Chloe's house and all that sort of stuff, but in this it's kind of limited, a little too limited if you ask me. A lot of the character drama tensions take place in this one pub called the Black Lantern, which I appreciate that they went back to a more condensed location, but I really would have preferred it if they just expanded just a little bit. I know I sound like one of those fans that are complaining about Life is Strange 2 being too expansive and Life is Strange 1 being too condensed, but you could say that True Colors is like a middle ground for the two of them, but I think a little more just could have been done here, just a little bit more. Alex Chen is a very likeable protagonist, and the ability to read empathy telepathically is a very interesting power idea. This power is kind of underutilized though. I mean, the more scripted segments of the power being used are fantastic, like in this one segment here in episode 1 where Alex is crossing the bridge to try and reach Ethan, and then she can pick up on his sphere, and then very real life looking things just happen, like a monster below the lake and stuff like that. I really enjoyed that sort of stuff, but when it comes to the gameplay itself, I think the power is really underutilized here. You pretty much just push a button, read someone's thoughts, and then think of a response to say to them. Now the rewind ability in Life is Strange 1 is far better to me personally, and the side characters in this game get very little development, and no character even touches the Chloe and Max friendship from the first game. In Life is Strange 1, almost every character Max develops a relationship with is compelling in its own way, but in True Colors, Alex's friendship with main side characters Ryan and Steph feel very, very underwhelming and rushed, and that's what I mean really when I say that the game is sort of hollow and a bit empty. There's potential here for a great game. It's not bad, it's just missing something. It's missing that key piece that made the first game special, at least to me anyway. I also have an issue with the game's length. I think even if you wandered around the town and interacted with everything you could, it still wouldn't be that long. I found myself beating episodes in like an hour or maybe slightly more, whereas in the first Life is Strange game I would do an episode a night and it felt like it took up more of my time. I know that sounds bad, things taking up my time, but at least Life is Strange 1 was compelling enough for me to want to keep playing. True Colors, I just found myself getting bored very, very easily, wanting to get through it really quickly, missing optional things that I could have done because I just didn't care all that much about the side characters. There's a good game buried beneath the surface here, but I think True Colors is just a bit empty and a bit lifeless in places. Characters outside of Alex aren't really that interesting to me, and maybe Gabe as well. I did like Gabe, but overall I just didn't think True Colors was that good. But I will be honest, it is very, very visually stunning and probably the best looking Life is Strange game, gone are the times of stiff animation and it's fully fleshed out motion capture and stuff like that. Oh, and I really didn't like the LARP. If you don't know what I mean, it's basically when Alex and and this character Ethan are doing this like this fantasy roleplay game where you get to interact with similar old-fashioned RPG elements where you select an attack or magic and stuff like that. It's just a little too goofy for me personally, and the dialogue was a bit cringe. If you like this sort of thing, I understand, but for me, I just could not stand this segment at all. And what this franchise is known for is the ability of consequences of choice. Now, I don't think the choices in this game really impact the ending all that much, and don't get me started at the ending. It's very underwhelming and kind of a is that it kind of thing. Now, I know that's ironic of me to say because the consequences and the actions and the impact of what would happen in the final choice of the first game. Also, you could say that none of your choices matter, but I'll get to that soon. Next up on the list is Life is Strange 2. Life is Strange 2 follows new characters Sean and Daniel Diaz as following the death of their late father Esteban. The boys now find themselves on the run and evading the law at every given second. This game was more of a journey, whereas the first game, as I mentioned before, was a little more condensed. Life is Strange 2 takes you to a bunch of locations through America. While I do like this game, I do think Sean is a good protagonist in his own right, but I think his brother was a bit of a dick. It's still a heartwarming story between two brothers traversing America to try and get to Mexico, but I do have some problems with this game. It's very unfocused in places and stuff seems to just happen for the sake of the plot contrivances, I think that's the right word for it, mostly because of Daniel, where he keeps making everything worse for Sean. But before I talk about what annoys me about this character in particular, I just want to say that it is a bit of a bummer that we don't get to use a magical power to help get through certain scenarios of the game, like in the first game. Before the Storm was different because the power wasn't involved at all, but in this game there is a power. In this game, Daniel has telekinesis, and unlike the first game where you can rewind time, this time the character you play as is Sean, the one without the power. So if you really think about it, if the power element was removed completely from this game, the plot wouldn't change all that much. Yes, Daniel is the one that caused the death of the police officer at the start of the game, and in episode 3 when Sean and Daniel are working for a weed farm and are about to receive their pay for the month, Sean tells Daniel not to come into the house with him and wait outside. And for reasons, I guess, that I can only explain because the plot needed to happen, Daniel decides to sneak inside Meryl's room because he got bored, only for Finn to spot the safe. So a scene later on could then play out as Finn tries to convince Sean and Daniel to use his power to rob the safe. So that's what I mean when I say stuff like that. But what I do like about the game is that the ending is based on how you raise Daniel, and the decisions you make throughout the game impact his development, but then stupid shit like this happens quite a lot. So ultimately, there are parts where no matter how you raise him, there'll be instances where he acts out and does stuff anyway. Like regardless of what choice you make, for example, he still goes out with Finn to try and rob the safe despite Sean either being for it or against it. These things did impact my playthrough a little bit, but overall I do like Life is Strange 2, but it's one of those games where the more I think about it, the less I like it. It does something completely different to the first game, and that's not going to be for everyone, I understand that. But it does feel a bit disconnected from the first game and Before the Storm. Like, maybe this game would have worked on its own if it wasn't branded as a Life is Strange game, I don't really know. But overall, it sounds like I'm saying a lot of shit about it, but I did really enjoy it. It just didn't hit anywhere near as much as Before the Storm or Life is Strange 1, but I think it is a little bit better than True Colours. And coming in second place is Life is Strange Before the Storm. And for me to describe Before the Storm, it would have to be this. This is how you do a prequel right. This time you take control of Chloe, who was my favourite character from the first game. This game dives into the backstory of her relationship with Rachel Amber, a character that went missing in the first game, a character that was spoken about so much in the first game, looking for her, trying to discover the secrets about where she went and stuff like that. We finally get to see the character in full motion, and I think she's a pretty damn entertaining character and a perfect addition to have some kind of dynamic with Chloe. This game has pretty much everything that the first game has in terms of having that Life is Strange vibe. It feels like a very faithful prequel of what came before. It has a beautiful soundtrack like the first. It's still based around Arcadia Bay, like the school, the junkyard, the student dorms, and some of the surrounding areas. So it has a very familiar vibe to the first game, making it feel connected. Well, I guess it is connected because it's a prequel. But I think overall it's my general like for the character of Chloe. Like, she was my favourite character in the first game, and seeing her relationship behind the scenes with David and her mom and how she's dealing with that, I think it was just really compelling to me. Now, one thing people might not like about this game is the fact that there aren't any powers in this game. Chloe didn't have any powers in the first game, and so she doesn't have any powers in this game either. But I think it worked in the game's favour. I think to add a random power in this game would just make no sense, because in the first game when Chloe first discovers Max's power, she's overwhelmed by it, doesn't even believe her at first. It's just one of those things. If they were to add a power mechanic into Before the storm, it would make zero sense. But overall, I don't have much to say about it because it is only 3 episodes. It is pretty short, but it is a very, very faithful adaptation. Well, I wouldn't say adaptation, but it's a faithful continuation / prequel of what we had before in a game that I really, really liked. And coming in first place, everyone, is Life is Strange, the first game. Now, when I first played this, I didn't know what to expect. I watched the trailers and immediately I was hooked. I was like, I have to play this. You can rewind time. The consequences of your actions could be a huge problem and stuff like that. So I thought I'd have to play this. In the first game, you play as Max. Now, what I find so relatable about Max, despite having absolutely nothing in common with her, is the fact that she reminds me of me in a lot of ways. I mean, who in the world hasn't gone through something that she's gone through? Self-doubt, anxiety, the troubles of fitting in, the troubles of trying to make friends, to trying to be the best person you can possibly be. Who hasn't gone through that before? And unlike Life is Strange 2, the game doesn't feel the need to beat up the protagonist constantly to make you sympathise with them, although that is a good technique, I suppose. Look at Spider-Man 2, for example. The shit that happens to Peter Parker in that film, of course you're going to care about the guy. This game does it in a way that doesn't constantly demean her, and seeing her constantly getting beat up for the sake of drama to make you connect with the character more. Now, her friendship with Chloe is really the thing that shines the most in this. This got the most tears out of me. It's just beautiful moment after beautiful moment. Now, a lot of people could argue that Chloe is not a great person, but I think that's the whole point of her character. She's not supposed to be a great person. If you think about it, a lot throughout any playthrough of Life is Strange, you will notice that Chloe will say something really harsh and negative, but will sort of apologise about it afterwards. She's a flawed individual. Now, that doesn't work for everybody, I understand that, but it worked for me personally. Chloe was a very relatable person to me. When I was a teenager, I lashed out at my parents quite a lot, not to the same extent that she did, and then she finds a safety net when Max comes back into her life for the first time after all these years. There's still a bit of tension there from Max sort of ghosting her from before, but they gradually build up that friendship again as if like nothing's happened, despite starting their friendship from scratch. Every decision that you make as Max has an impact and a consequence, but here's the point where I get where the ending comes into play. Now, the ending, if you haven't played Life is Strange, I suggest you don't watch this part of the video. If you want to click off now, I understand. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. So anyway, the final choice in this game is you either sacrifice Chloe by going back in time and stopping her death in the first place, or you just let the tornado destroy Arcadia Bay. I personally chose to let the tornado destroy Arcadia Bay and save Chloe, because if you think about it, throughout the entire game, the choices with Chloe are the only ones that really matter. But here's a little argument I have. It might not be the best kind of argument in the world, but this is why it works for me personally. Throughout Life is Strange 1, Max uses this rewind ability to pretty much help people out, benefit herself in a sense, and she plays around with time, which is the thing that caused the storm in the first place. I try to look at it as the ending of Life is Strange 1 is karma. It's basically the world and nature and maybe God saying stuff like, no, you can't just go and do that. So if you do decide to go back and decide to not save Chloe, so then the time travel thing never happens in the first place, so the storm is fixed. So if you do decide to pick the latter and go with sacrifice Chloe, Max will go back in time to the moment where she first saved Chloe from getting shot by Nathan in the girls' bathroom. This to me feels like nature and God and everything like that are biting back at Max and saying you can't just do shit like that. And so she learns the consequences of using time travel in the first place. That's just how I see it. I mean, a lot of people come up with way better arguments than that. If you want to, drop them down in the comments. I will be happy to read them. Let's all be civil. We don't have to be enemies, guys. But I try and look at it from that angle because it sort of works for me in a sense. And I ultimately don't think that the choices that Max makes throughout the entire game are completely invalid either. She's an everyday kind of person. An everyday kind of person that just wants to be the best person she can. I think if I were in her shoes, I would have used these kind of same choices as well to try and stop Kate from jumping off the roof, to try and be friends with Victoria despite her being an unlikable bitch, to try and get justice for Rachel. All of that combined together is a normal human thing that people would just do, if you're a good person, that is. But it's always been said, in no matter what media, books, films, video games, playing with time travel will never end well for you. And so I like to look at this ending as a way of the world saying, no, you can't just do that. So Max either lets it play out and lets everyone in Arcadia Bay die, or save her friend. And it was one of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to make in a video game. And that to me is why Life is Strange 1 really pulls at my heartstrings. And to me, no game in the Life is Strange series has touched the quality of this game ever since. Sure, Life is Strange 2 was more expansive. Sure, Life is Strange True Colours was more visually pleasing, but nothing quite touches the heart of this game to me. And although very visually pleasing and very, very eerie, fuck this stealth sequence, it was so random and out of nowhere. And that is all I have time for today, guys. Thank you very much for listening or watching, whatever you're doing right now. As always, I hope you have a fantastic day. If you consider clicking that like button, it really helps us out in the algorithm. We would really appreciate that. Don't forget to subscribe for more gaming-related content. I've been Jim. Have a nice day and take care.